I financed my daughter's wedding with my entire life savings, only for my new son-in-law to ridicule my sacrifice in his wedding toast before a crowd of 300. I forced a smile, swallowing my rage. But then the groom's own uncle nearly choked upon hearing my name and seized the microphone. What he revealed next brought my son-in-law to tears and changed the course of everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. My coffee had been sitting untouched for nearly half an hour, but I held on to the ceramic mug for something to do with my hands. Clara, my daughter, was pacing by the kitchen window, the sharp clicks of her designer shoes a stark contrast to my scuffed linoleum floor. Her fiancé, Ethan, was lounging in my worn-out armchair as if it were his own throne, the glare from his luxury, watch flashing every time he moved his hand. "Dad, we have something serious to discuss." Clara's voice had that syrupy tone she always used when she was about to ask for something major, something really major. I put the mug down, steeling myself for what was coming. "What is it, honey?" Ethan sat up, a well-rehearsed smile spreading over his face. "Arthur, we need 60,000. It's for our dream wedding." The number felt like a punch to the gut. $60,000. My retirement fund barely covered my mortgage and groceries. I could feel my muscles tighten as I tried to wrap my head around their request. "Kids, I just don't have that kind of money." Clara spun around, her eyes already welling up with tears. "Dad, this is my only chance for a perfect day. Ethan's family is very influential. There will be important guests. I can't look like I come from nothing. Sweetheart, I get that weddings are costly, but 60,000. Other men would do anything for their daughters." Ethan's voice was now frigid and calculating. My Uncle Robert always says, "A real man steps up for his family's defining moments." I watched my daughter's expression crumple. She collapsed into a chair opposite me, the manufactured tears now flowing freely. It was the same manipulative tactic she had perfected in her teens, only this time she had an accomplice. "Dad, if you love me, you'll figure it out. I've been dreaming of this since I was a little girl. Don't you remember me trying on Mom's old wedding dress?" The mention of my late wife, Helen, twisted a knot deep inside me. She would have wanted Clara to be happy, but she also would have seen right through this emotional extortion. "Clara, you know I'd do anything for you, but I'm living on a librarian's retirement fund. I have about 40,000 in savings, and that's meant to see me through my old age." 40,000 is a good starting point, Ethan cut in, already typing on his phone. "You can get a loan for the other 20. Lenders love people with a steady retirement income." "Ethan, I'm 65. Getting into debt at this stage of my life is what devoted fathers do." Clara's voice was thick with feigned emotion. "Mom would have made it happen. She always believed in making dreams a reality." The room suddenly felt claustrophobic, their demands closing in on me. I looked at Clara's tear-stained face, at Ethan's expectant smirk, at the pile of unpaid bills on my kitchen counter. I'll see what I can figure out." Clara flew from her chair and wrapped her arms around my neck. "Oh, Dad, I knew I could count on you. You're the best father ever." Ethan got to his feet, smoothing his blazer. "We'll need confirmation by Friday. The venue needs its deposit, and the caterer won't reserve the date without payment." They gathered their belongings, Clara chattering excitedly about flowers and photographers, while Ethan checked his phone. In moments, they were gone, leaving behind the cloying scent of her perfume and the crushing weight of their demands. I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the calculator I'd retrieved from a drawer. 40,000 in savings, another 20,000 needed. The digits swam before my eyes as I tried to comprehend what I had just promised. Outside, the sound of their car faded, and the house returned to its usual quiet. I picked up my cold coffee, put it down, and reached for the phone book to find the number for Sterling Trust Bank. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. After their departure, the house felt oppressive, as if the walls had absorbed their entitlement and were pressing in on me. I laid out my financial documents on the dining table, bank statements, retirement papers, the usual stack of bills. The calculator's bright green numbers mocked me. 30,852 to 17. That was my entire life savings. I re-entered the numbers, willing them to change. They refused. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford that night. I'd drift off in my armchair only to jolt awake with financial calculations racing through my mind. A $20,000 loan at my age. The bedroom felt cavernous without Helen to talk things through with, so I stayed in the living room, mesmerized by late-night commercials selling impossible solutions to people in my exact predicament. By dawn, my mind was made up. The downtown branch of Sterling Trust Bank was a time capsule from 30 years ago when I opened my first account. Marble floors amplified every footstep and brass fittings gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights. Clutching my folder, I walked to the information desk. I'd like to talk to someone about a personal loan. The young woman gave me a practiced smile. "Of course, sir. I'll get you set up with Mr. Evans in our loan department." Carlos Evans looked younger than Clara, with a warm smile and a confident handshake. His office was compact but tidy, with family photos neatly arranged next to his computer. "How can I help you today, Mr. Cole? I need a loan for $20,000. The words felt more solid than I did. "It's for my daughter's wedding," he typed, pulling up my account. Fingers flew across the keyboard. "I see you've been a client for a long time. Your retirement deposits are very reliable. What's the time frame on this?" "As soon as possible. The money is needed this week." Carlos nodded, scribbling notes. "With your credit history and consistent income, we can make this work. The interest rate would be 8.2%, and we can structure it over 5 years to keep the payments low." 5 years? I would be 70 by the time it was paid off if I was still around. But Clara's face, with those convincing tears, came to mind. What would the monthly payments be? Around $425 a month? More than I spent on food, more than my utilities, but manageable if I cut back on absolutely everything. No more meals out, no more small pleasures, just survival until the loan was settled. I'll do it. The paperwork took forever. Forms, signatures, disclosures about rates and penalties. Carlos was patient, explaining each page, likely accustomed to older clients needing extra time. "The funds will be in your account by Friday, Mr. Cole." I thanked him and walked to my car, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. Relieved that I could give Clara her dream, but dreading that I had just signed away my future for a single day of extravagance. The drive home took me past the public library where I'd worked for 3 decades. Young people hurried across the lawn, full of dreams and possibilities. I was once their age, with a future that felt limitless, 30 years of service, and this was all I had to show for it. A modest retirement fund and a daughter who treated me like an ATM. But perhaps I was being too harsh. Clara did love me. I knew she did. Sometimes love just gets twisted up with wants and expectations. Helen used to say I was too lenient with her, always caving when she cried. Maybe she was right. Friday morning, an email confirmed it. Deposit processed, $20,000. I stared at the screen, then picked up the phone to call Clara. "Dad, perfect timing. I'm just going over floral designs with the planner. Honey, can you and Ethan stop by later? I have some good news for you." Her shriek of delight was deafening. "Oh my gosh, yes, we'll be there at 3. Dad, you're a lifesaver." I hung up and surveyed my simple living room. In a few hours, I would hand over their fantasy and cement my own grim financial reality. The weight of it all sat in my chest, like a stone, but it was too late to turn back. The hours crawled by, filled with a nervous energy as I steeled myself for what was next. They arrived precisely at 3 p.m., Clara practically vibrating with excitement as she hugged me. Ethan trailed behind her, carrying a leather briefcase that likely cost more than my entire retirement fund. "So?" Clara perched on the sofa, her eyes wide with anticipation. "Don't leave us hanging." I sat down in my armchair, the bank papers in my lap. "I got the money. All 60,000. Ethan arched an eyebrow, impressed in spite of himself. How'd you pull that off? I emptied my savings and took out a loan for the rest. I tried to sound nonchalant, as if borrowing $20,000 at 65 was a daily occurrence. The money is ready for your wedding expenses. Clara threw her arms around me again, this time with tears of genuine joy. Dad, I can't believe it. We're going to have the most amazing wedding. Ethan's whole family is going to be blown away. There's just one condition. The words were softer than I'd intended, but they both heard me. Ethan's face hardened, a look of weariness in his eyes. What condition? I want to invite someone very important to me who should be there for this. Clara pulled away, her joy replaced by confusion. Who? Dad, this is our wedding. The guest list is finalized. We already gave the caterer the numbers. I know, but this is important. Just one extra person. Ethan stepped forward, his lawyerly instincts taking over. Look, old man, you paid. Fine. But we decide who's on the guest list. That's the deal. Family and close friends. This is like family in a way. I kept my voice even, though my heart was pounding. Someone who was a part of my life before either of you were born. Clara got up and paced to the window. Dad, don't do this. This is about Ethan and me, not some mystery person from your past. I'm not asking for much. Just one chair at the reception, one meal at a table I've already paid for. We're grateful for the money, Ethan cut in, but it doesn't give you control you don't have. Our day, our rules. His coldness was a physical blow. I looked to my daughter for support, but her face was set in a familiar, stubborn expression. Dad, we can't just add people now. Do you know how complicated seating charts are? The venue has capacity limits. The caterer needs the final count. One person won't. It's not about one person. Clara's voice rose to a shrill pitch I hadn't heard since she was a teenager. It's about you trying to use your money to control our day. That's manipulative. The irony of being called manipulative after their performance a few days ago was staggering. A cold dread settled in my stomach as I watched them unite against me. Ethan adjusted his expensive suit. Here's how this is going to go. We will accept your very generous gift and have the wedding we want with the guests we choose. If you have a problem with that, maybe you shouldn't be there. Ethan! Clara looked startled for a second, then her expression melted into something far worse. Pity. Dad, he's just stressed. But you have to see that this is our day. We can't have your personal issues disrupting it. I sat in my armchair, looking at the two people for whom I had just sacrificed my future, and saw complete strangers. Entitled, cold strangers who saw my sacrifice as their right and my single request as an outrageous imposition. I'm not asking for much, I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. You're asking for something that isn't yours to ask for. Ethan grabbed his briefcase and walked to the door. Come on, Clara, we have appointments. Clara hesitated, her gaze shifting between us. For a brief moment I thought she might side with her father. Then she picked up her designer bag and followed Ethan. Dad, just think about it, okay? Don't make this difficult. The front door clicked shut, the sound as final as a bank vault ceiling. I sat in the sudden silence, the echoes of their demands, and the sting of their dismissal hanging in the air. $60,000, and I couldn't even invite one guest. The bank papers had fallen to the floor during the argument. I bent down to pick them up, my knees groaning in protest. Outside, their car engine roared to life and then faded away, taking my money and my dignity with it. For the first time since Helen's passing, I felt utterly alone. Ethan stepped closer, his designer cologne filling the stale air of my home. You think because you paid, you get to control our day? I stayed seated, my knuckles white as I gripped the arms of my chair. It's not about control, it's about including one person who is important to me. Important to you? Clara's voice was laced with disbelief. What about what's important to us? To our life together, the life that I'm bankrolling? The words escaped before I could catch them. Ethan's eyes narrowed, and I saw my daughter's face flush with indignation. Bankrolling? She let out a humorless laugh. Dad, you're not bankrolling anything. You're giving a gift to your only daughter for the most important day of her life. That's what a father is supposed to do. Precisely. Ethan crossed his arms, the light catching his wedding band. This isn't a negotiation, old man. This is family. Family? The word hurt more than I could have imagined. I looked around my simple living room at the furniture Helen and I had picked out together 30 years ago, at the photos of a smiling, loving Clara, at the coffee table nicked from years of board games. If this is what family is, I said softly, then why can't I have one person there who matters to me? Clara threw her hands up in exasperation. Because it's not about you. Why can't you understand that? This is Ethan's and my day. Our guests, our choices, our party, paid for with my life savings. Life savings? Ethan's laugh was sharp and cruel. You mean your obligation, your privilege to contribute to your daughter's happiness. A coldness settled deep in my chest. These were not the words of grateful children. These were the demands of entitled strangers who saw my contribution as nothing more than their due. I sold off my investments, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I took on a debt that I'll be paying for years, all so you could have this wedding. One guest seems like a small price. Clara started crying again. Now you're trying to guilt us, trying to make us feel bad for accepting your gift. Gift? The word was sharper this time. Clara, this is not a gift. This is me sacrificing my future, so you can impress people who don't even know my name. Ethan moved to Clara's side, wrapping a protective arm around her. Listen to me carefully, Arthur. We appreciate what you've done, but appreciation doesn't equal control. We set the guest list. We set the tone. We decide what kind of wedding we want. And if I can't live with that? They exchanged a look, quick, decisive, united. When Ethan turned back to me, his expression was colder than I had ever seen. Then, maybe you don't need to be there at all. The silence stretched between us, a vast, empty canyon. I looked at my daughter, waiting for her to object, to defend me, to remember 32 years of love. Instead, she nodded. Dad, if you can't just be happy for us without trying to make it about you, maybe Ethan is right. Maybe you should just stay home. Stay home for my own daughter's wedding. The wedding I was paying for with money I didn't have. I slowly rose to my feet, my old knees protesting. I see. Ethan grabbed his briefcase, his movements clipped with annoyance. Good. I'm glad we're on the same page. Clara paused at the door, her expression softening into something that might have been regret. Dad, you can still come. Just don't make it about you. Don't make it about me. The man paying $60,000 for the event shouldn't make it about himself. They left, the door closing with a quiet click that felt utterly final. I stood in my living room, surrounded by the silence they had created and the weight of their disdain. The loan documents were scattered on the floor. I bent to collect them, my eyes scanning the terms that I had agreed to. $425 a month for 60 months. $20,000 plus interest, to be paid by a man on a fixed income until he was 70. All so my daughter could tell me to stay out of her life. For the first time since Helen's funeral, I felt completely and truly abandoned. The weeks that followed were a blur of muted colors. June arrived, promising summer and new beginnings, but within our family something had permanently broken. My phone rang less. When Clara called, it was strictly business, florist deposits, venue payments, catering deadlines. Never about my opinion, always about my money. Dad, the deposit for Blooms & Cohen is due by Thursday. Her voice was as crisp and impersonal as a bank teller's. $2,500 should cover the arrangements we picked. I didn't ask what arrangements. After a disastrous trip to the florist, where my suggestion for modest centerpieces was met with eye rolls, I'd learned my place. Whatever you like is fine, I'd said, watching the florist quote prices that dwarfed my entire retirement fund. Clara had shot Ethan that look, the one reserved for out-of-touch relatives. Dad, your style is just different from our vision. Different. That word became a recurring theme. At meetings with vendors, questions were always directed at the happy couple, while I sat by with my checkbook, a silent walking wallet in a suit I'd bought for the occasion. The caterer's office smelled of rosemary and garlic, but I could only taste the bitterness of being invisible. Ethan and Clara pointed at menu items that cost more per person than my weekly grocery bill. "We can't look cheap," Clara explained to the caterer, as if I wasn't even in the room. "Quality over budget." An easy philosophy when it's someone else's budget. By mid-June, I was completely excluded. Planning meetings were held without me. My input was replaced by cheerful updates and hurried phone calls. "Everything is going great, Dad. The venue coordinator loves our vision, never ours, always theirs." One afternoon, I drove to the Rosewood estate myself, wanting to see where my $60,000 was going. The ballroom was stunning. Crystal, chandeliers, polished marble, vast windows overlooking immaculate gardens. It was beautiful and impossibly expensive, exactly what they wanted. The event coordinator, Jessica, gave me a tour. "Your daughter and her fiancé have impeccable taste. This is going to be one of our most spectacular events of the year." I just nodded, picturing Clara in her dress, Ethan in his tux, surrounded by 300 people who would never know the cost of their perfect day. "Are you excited for the wedding?" Jessica asked. Excited wasn't the right word. Resigned. Melancholy. "It will be lovely," I managed to say. The meeting with the DJ was my last attempt to participate. I brought a list of songs, classics that Helen and I had loved, songs that held meaning for our family. Ethan let me play the first one for about 30 seconds before stopping me. "This is our wedding, not yours. We want music that represents us." Who they were, apparently, had nothing to do with where they came from. The final insult came in late June, wrapped in the guise of thoughtfulness. Clara called one evening, her voice artificially sweet. "Dad, we've decided to take care of the rest of the details. You've done so much, and we don't want to burden you with all the little things, like whether her father would have any say at all in the wedding he was bankrolling." "We've got it from here," she said. "You just need to show up and have a good time. Show up like a guest at a stranger's party," which I was finally realizing was exactly what I was. A formal invitation arrived in my mailbox, addressed to Mr. Arthur Cole in beautiful script. Not "Father of the Bride," just another name on a long list of people invited to witness the spectacle my sacrifice had bought. The invitation sat on my table for 3 days before I opened it. Thick cardstock, elegant font, perfect wording requesting my presence at their celebration. My presence, not my blessing, just my attendance. I RSVP'd with a single word: attending. The morning of June 15th was picture perfect. A clear blue sky, a soft breeze, a day Helen would have called a gift from heaven. I put on my best suit, the one I wore to Clara's graduation and other milestones. The man in the mirror looked older than 65, worn down by months of financial strain and emotional rejection. St. James Chapel stood on the corner of Elm and Park, its stone spires reaching for that perfect sky. The parking lot was already jammed with luxury cars I didn't recognize. An usher greeted me at the door. "You can sit wherever you'd like." I had always imagined sitting in the front row, the traditional place for the bride's father. Instead, I was waved toward the back, behind strangers who whispered about the ceremony. The front pews were filled with Ethan's colleagues and Clara's friends. The second row was occupied by Ethan's extended family, including a distinguished-looking older man who commanded the room's attention. That must be Robert Vance, I thought, Ethan's uncle, the real estate mogul whose approval meant more than mine ever could. The organ music began, and the procession started. Ethan stood at the altar, handsome in his bespoke tuxedo. Then Clara appeared at the back of the church. Even through my pain, I saw how beautiful she was. Her gown shimmered, catching the light from the stained glass windows. My little girl, a grown woman. She walked down the aisle alone. No father. On her arm, no acknowledgement of the man who had raised her. I had pictured this moment 1,000 times, her holding my arm, whispering that she loved me. Instead, she floated past my pew without a glance, her eyes fixed on Ethan. The ceremony was lovely. Vows were exchanged, promises made. I promise to honor the family that made you who you are, Ethan said, his voice confident. The irony was suffocating. Rings were exchanged, and they were pronounced husband and wife. Applause filled the chapel as Ethan kissed his bride. Throughout it all, I sat in silence, a witness to the celebration my sacrifice had made possible, a stranger among people who would never know the price of their perfect day. As the newlyweds walked back up the aisle, I caught Clara's eye. She smiled, a radiant, joyful smile. But it wasn't for me. It was for the room, for everyone and no one. The guests filed out, buzzing about how beautiful it all was. They certainly spared no expense, someone behind me commented. No expense indeed. I slipped out a side door and walked to my car, joining the stream of traffic heading to the Rosewood Estate for the reception. 300 guests celebrating a new beginning with gourmet food, an open bar, and a live band. All of it paid for by a man who had become a stranger at his own daughter's wedding. The 15-minute drive to the Rosewood Estate felt endless. My modest car was an island in a sea of BMWs and Mercedes, owned by people who had never sacrificed their future for a single day of celebration. The estate was breathtaking. Limestone columns, sprawling gardens, chandeliers visible through massive windows. Every detail was a testament to my depleted bank account. Guests flowed through the grand entrance, their laughter echoing off the marble floors as they headed to the ballroom for cocktail hour. I walked in alone, watching as Clara and Ethan held court near the bar, looking like royalty. "Arthur," Ethan's voice was unnaturally loud and cheerful. "Come meet some of our friends." I walked over, sensing a trap. Ethan had his arm around Clara, both of them glowing, surrounded by young, successful-looking people. "Everyone, this is my father-in-law." Ethan's smile was painfully bright, a true hero. He took out a loan just so we could have this day. The group turned to me with polite smiles. A woman in a designer dress spoke. "Really? How incredibly generous." "Yes," Ethan continued, his voice taking on a familiar mocking edge. "He's very dedicated to our happiness, aren't you, Arthur?" The faces around me waited for my answer. I could feel the pressure to play along. "I just want my daughter to be happy," I said quietly. "Happy?" Ethan laughed, raising his glass. "She has expensive taste, but that's what lines of credit are for. Am I right?" A ripple of laughter went through the group. It wasn't overtly malicious, but each laugh felt like a tiny cut. "Simon," Clara murmured, but she didn't stop him. "What? I'm just celebrating your father's generosity." He turned back to his audience. "Did you know he had to cash out his entire life savings for tonight?" Talk about dedication. A man in an expensive suit let out a low whistle. Wow, that's some commitment. I felt my face flush. Around us, the party continued. Servers passed appetizers that cost more than my weekly food budget. A string quartet played music I had never heard. Of course, Ethan went on, enjoying the spotlight. He even tried to attach strings, wanted to control our guest list just because he was footing the bill. "Really?" the woman asked, her eyes wide. "What kind of strings?" Ethan's eyes shone with a cruel glee. Oh, he had some mystery guest he wanted to invite, someone important to him, as if this day was about anyone but Clara and me. The group murmured, in understanding, nodding along. They saw a groom protecting his wedding from an overbearing father-in-law, not a man publicly shaming the person who had made it all possible. "Well," said the man in the suit, "it sounds like you handled it right. The wedding should be about the couple." "Exactly," Ethan beamed. Though I have to admit, having someone else pay for it all certainly makes things easier. More laughter. More. Casual cruelty. I stood there, a smile plastered on my face, enduring every word while trying to hold on to what little dignity I had left. Across the room, I saw staff setting tables with centerpieces that cost more than my mortgage payment. Everything was perfect. Everything paid for with money I'd be repaying until I was 70. Speaking of which, Ethan said, checking his watch, my Uncle Robert should be here soon. Wait until you meet him. Now there's a man who understands family. His uncle, the real estate mogul Robert Vance. Ethan's voice was filled with a genuine warmth and respect he had never shown me. He raised me after my parents passed, Ethan explained. Built a real estate empire from the ground up. A true success. Story. A success story. Unlike the retired librarian standing before them, the group began to break up as dinner was about to be served, but Ethan's words hung in the air. I watched him work the room, confident and cruel, eagerly awaiting his uncle's arrival, while dismissing the man who had funded his perfect evening. Around me, 300 guests prepared for a lavish dinner, none of them knowing the true cost of their champagne and caviar. But I had a feeling that was about to change. 2 hours later, the reception was in full swing. Guests mingled, the sound of their chatter a pleasant hum under the music of the live band I'd paid for but hadn't chosen. Ethan kept glancing at the door, his anticipation palpable. He should be here any moment, he said to Clara, adjusting his bow tie for the 10th time. She squeezed his hand. Uncle Robert will be so impressed. Of course he will. I stood at the edge of the ballroom, sipping a whiskey I couldn't afford, an invisible observer at my own party. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. Suddenly, the energy in the room shifted. A distinguished man stood in the doorway, and conversations faltered as all eyes turned to him. He had the easy confidence of a man used to being the center of attention. Silver hair, an impeccably tailored suit, and eyes that missed nothing. Robert Vance had arrived. Ethan practically flew across the room, leaving his conversation mid-sentence. I watched their warm embrace, a display of genuine affection that felt like another twist of the knife. Everyone, Ethan's voice boomed across the room. I want you all to meet my uncle, Robert Vance, the man who shaped me. The crowd moved closer, drawn by his charisma. Robert accepted the attention with practiced grace, shaking hands and making small talk. Ethan, you've really outdone yourself, Robert said, his eyes sweeping the room. This is spectacular. His voice was deep and commanded respect. I studied him from across the room, trying to see what made him so important to my son-in-law. Uncle. Rob, you have to meet everyone, Ethan beamed. This is the wedding we always dreamed of. Dreams come true with hard work, Robert replied, his gaze still scanning the room with a businessman's eye for detail. A woman near me whispered to her friend, "That's Robert Vance. He owns half the commercial real estate in the city. He's worth a fortune." A fortune. No wonder Ethan idolized him. The guests swarmed around Robert, eager for an introduction. He handled it all with charm and poise, remembering names and asking thoughtful questions. Mr. Vance, a young woman, gushed, "We've heard so much about you. It's an honor." "The honor's all mine," Robert said smoothly. "Any friend of Ethan and Clara is like family to me." Family. The word had meaning when he said it. He treated my daughter with a respect I hadn't seen from her own husband. Ethan stayed, close, soaking in the reflected glory of his uncle's presence. "Uncle Rob," Ethan said, "let me tell you about some of our guests. You'll love this." I found myself drifting closer, curious to see this dynamic up close. Whatever Robert Vance represented to my son-in-law was powerful. Robert's eyes took in every detail, the extravagant flowers, the top-shelf liquor, the fine china, all made possible by my loan. "This must have cost a pretty penny," he remarked quietly to Ethan. "Worth every cent," Ethan replied, When you love someone, you spare no expense, as if he had spent a single one of his own cents. I watched as Ethan's entire demeanor shifted in his uncle's presence. The casual cruelty was gone, replaced by an almost boyish need for approval. "You've built a beautiful life here," Robert said, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Your parents would have been so proud." The mention of his late parents brought a flicker of genuine emotion to Ethan's face. The tragedy that had brought them together had clearly forged a deep bond. As dinner began, I found my place card at a table in the back, far from the head. Table where Robert sat with the bride and groom. From my distant vantage point, I could see Ethan talking animatedly, his gestures expansive as he told stories to his uncle. The man who had raised him commanded a respect that I had never received. Whatever was about to happen would stem from that fundamental difference in how we were perceived, and I had a feeling the night was far from over. An hour after Robert's arrival, Ethan was a different person. The cold, calculating man I knew was gone, replaced by an animated performer, drunk on wine and his uncle's approval. The combination was about to become explosive. "Uncle Rob," Ethan said, his voice carrying to the nearby tables, "you know what's hilarious about all this?" Robert was slicing into a filet mignon, the most expensive item on the menu I'd paid for, without ever seeing it. "What's that? My father-in-law here thinks he gets a say just because he's paying the bills." Several guests turned to listen, drawn in by Ethan's loud, theatrical tone. My stomach tightened. I knew what was coming. Robert paused, his fork in midair. "A say?" "Oh, yeah." Ethan's voice was filled with a gleeful cruelty. "Poor Arthur over there." He gestured in my direction. "Wanted to dictate our guest list. Can you believe it?" I gripped my glass, watching as Robert's expression shifted. He followed Ethan's gesture, his eyes landing on me for the first time that night. He actually demanded that we invite some mystery person from his past, Ethan continued, warming to his subject. Someone important to him. As if our wedding was about anyone but us. Laughter spread from the surrounding tables. The guests now had a floor show to go with their expensive meal, all at my expense. "That does seem a bit out of line," someone commented. "Right?" Ethan beamed. I had to explain to him that this is our day, our party, our rules. Paying for it doesn't make you the puppet master. More laughter. I sat frozen, watching my son-in-law use my pain as entertainment for his beloved uncle. Robert's expression had become more thoughtful, his sharp eyes picking up on something in the dynamic. And he eventually accepted that. Simon's confidence soared with each laugh. Though it took some convincing. The poor guy had to take out a huge loan to afford all this. He swept his arm dramatically across the ballroom, indicating the flowers, the food, the waitstaff. "Alone?" Robert's voice was quiet, but held a new note of something I couldn't place. "Oh, yeah, Arthur Cole had to empty his life savings and borrow $20,000 just for this one night." Ethan's voice rang with a cruel triumph. Talk about a commitment. The name hung in the air. I saw Robert's face change. The shift was subtle, but it was there. His fork clattered onto his plate. "What did you say his name was?" Robert's voice was low, controlled. Ethan, oblivious, continued his performance. "Arthur Cole, nice old guy, but totally out of his element. I had to explain to him that this isn't 1985. A quality event requires a serious investment. The laughter around us was starting to sound strained. Even some of the guests were beginning to see the cruelty in Ethan's words, but Ethan, high on his uncle's attention, pressed on. "The best part is, he still thinks he gets a say in how we spend his money." I had to set him straight about who's in charge in this family. Robert was completely still now. His eyes were fixed on Ethan, but the warmth was gone, replaced by something cold and hard. "Arthur Cole," Robert repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "That's the one." Ethan raised his glass in a mock toast. "To fathers-in-law who know their place, signing checks and keeping their mouths shut." A few people laughed uncomfortably, but most just exchanged uneasy glances. Even Clara looked like she was starting to realize Ethan had gone too far. Robert set down his fork with a deliberate click. His eyes found mine across the room, and for a split second, time stood still. I saw a flicker of recognition in his gaze, not just of a name, but of something deeper, something that was about to bring the whole charade crashing down. As the evening wound down, the master of ceremonies tapped his glass, calling for the groom's toast. Simon strode to the microphone, flushed with wine and self-importance, completely unaware that his next words would shatter his world. "Thanks you all for being here," his voice boomed. "What an amazing night." Polite applause followed. I sat at my table, bracing myself for the final humiliation. Robert remained at the head table, his glass untouched, his eyes fixed on his nephew with an unreadable expression. "I want to thank everyone who made this possible," Simon continued. "My beautiful bride, our incredible friends, and especially," he paused for dramatic effect, "especially my father-in-law, who showed us all the true meaning of financial dedication." A few guests chuckled. Simon's smile widened. "Seriously, folks, let me tell you about commitment. How many fathers would cash out their entire life savings for one party?" More uneasy laughter. "But that's not all." Simon raised his glass. When that wasn't enough, this man went out and got a personal loan at 65 years old. The room was growing quiet now, the cruelty of his words becoming undeniable. "So let's all raise our glasses to Arthur Cole, the man who mortgaged his golden years so we could have our golden day." The familiar sting of humiliation washed over me, but it was different this time. Distant, replaced by a cold clarity about the man my daughter had married. "And the best part," Simon's voice rose with a final cruel flourish, "is how he wanted to control our guest list, as if paying for the party gives you a say. But don't worry about old Arthur. After tonight, Clara and I promise to make sure his sacrifice really pays off. For us. That's when it happened." Robert Vance, who had been sitting like a statue, suddenly lunged forward. His glass hit the table with a loud crack, champagne spilling across the white linen like blood. "Stop!" The word was an explosion. Simon stumbled back from the microphone in shock. "Give me that microphone." The ballroom went silent. 300 guests stared as the distinguished businessman interrupted the groom's toast. "Uncle Rob, what's—" "The microphone. Now." Simon's hand trembled as he passed it to his uncle. All his confidence, all his arrogance, evaporated under Robert's furious gaze. Robert rose from his chair, his movements commanding the attention of everyone in the room. When he spoke, his voice was filled with a moral authority that could not be ignored. "There's something you all need to hear." The silence was absolute. Servers froze. Guests held their breath. Robert's eyes found mine across the crowded room, and for the first time that night, I saw something that looked like respect, something that was about to change everything. Robert held the microphone, his hand steady, but his voice was thick with emotion. The entire ballroom was frozen, waiting. 32 years ago, Robert began, his voice echoing through the speakers. There was a devastating house fire on Oak Street, right here in this city. A few of the older guests murmured in recognition. A knot formed in my stomach as memories I had long suppressed came rushing back. The acrid smell of smoke, the wail of sirens, the sound of a child crying in terror. "A young couple died in that fire," Robert continued, his eyes locked on Simon. "They left behind a 2-year-old son trapped in an upstairs bedroom as the flames engulfed the house. Simon's face had gone ghost white. Clara reached for his hand, but he was frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. The fire department was still minutes away. The neighbors could only stand and watch, knowing a child was inside but unable to get to him. But one man, a complete stranger, heard that little boy's cries and didn't think twice. My own hands were shaking now. I could see the burning house as if it were yesterday, the flames devouring the windows, the desperate cries for help. This stranger ran into that inferno without any thought for his own life. He battled through the smoke and heat, found that terrified toddler, and carried him out just moments before the entire structure collapsed. A wave of whispers swept through the room. Several people were turning to look at me now. The pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. That stranger suffered third-degree burns on his hands and arms, Robert said, his voice cracking. He spent days in the hospital. When he was released, he asked only that the child be placed with relatives who could love him. Simon was staring at his uncle, a look of dawning horror on his face. That little boy grew up to be a successful man, surrounded by love, never knowing the name of the hero who had saved him. That child, Robert's voice broke, was you, Simon. The words struck the room like a thunderclap. Gasps echoed from every table. Simon's champagne glass fell from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. And that hero, Robert said, his eyes finding mine across the room once more. The man who ran into a burning building for a stranger's child, who asked for nothing, who carried his scars in silence for 32 years, is Arthur Cole. The silence that followed was deafening. Simon stood paralyzed, his face a mask of confusion, shock, and dawning horror. Clara had her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. I sat in my chair, the focus of 300 pairs of eyes, remembering a night when I had simply done what needed to be done. I had no idea, I said, my voice barely a whisper, but the microphone picked it up. I never knew that little boy was you. Simon's knees buckled. He sank into his chair, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking with violent sobs. 32 years, Robert continued, his voice now a blade of judgment. For 32 years, this man has lived with the scars from saving your life. And tonight I watched you mock him, humiliate him, and treat him like an inconvenience. The very man who gave you every breath you've taken since you were a toddler. The crowd was stirring, the whispers growing louder as the full weight of it all sank in. The lavish party, funded by a hero, the cruel jokes aimed at the man who had risked everything. Every penny this man spent on your wedding, Robert said, his voice rising with righteous anger. Every sacrifice he made, every insult he endured, he did it for the same reason he ran into that fire. Because that is who he is, a man who puts others before himself, even when they are not worthy of it. Simon looked up, his face streaked with tears, his eyes meeting mine. In that moment I didn't see the cruel man who had tormented me for months. I saw the terrified child I had pulled from a burning house so long ago. And despite everything, my heart ached for him. Simon staggered to his feet, his face transformed by the truth. The cruel arrogance was gone, replaced by something raw and broken. He started walking toward me, each step a heavy burden of guilt and shame. The 300 guests watched in silence. Arthur, his voice cracked, please forgive me. I stood to meet him, this man I had saved as a child and who had tormented me as an adult. You didn't know, son, I said quietly. None of us did. But I should have known better, Simon choked out, tears flowing freely. You gave me everything, your money, your dignity, and I spat it back in your face. I treated you like nothing when you were... He was everything, Robert's voice boomed from the microphone, the reason you are alive today. Simon fell to his knees in front of me, humbling himself before everyone. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to undo what I've done. I reached down and pulled him to his feet, feeling the eyes of the entire room on us. You stand up, I said. You become a better man. That's how you fix it. Simon nodded, wiping his eyes, and turned to face the crowd. His voice, when he spoke, was stripped of all its earlier arrogance. I need that microphone back, he said to his uncle. Robert handed it to him, his expression a mixture of pride and pain. Simon took the microphone with trembling hands. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice was hoarse with emotion. Everything I said tonight was wrong. Worse than wrong. It was cruel and ungrateful. He turned to me, his eyes filled with tears. This man, Arthur Cole, is not just my wife's father. He is not just the generous man who paid for this incredible party. Simon's voice grew stronger, steadier. He is the reason I am standing here at all. 32 years ago, he risked his life to save mine. He ran into a burning building and pulled me out, receiving scars he carries to this day. A murmur of awe went through the crowd. Some began to clap, but Simon held up a hand, and how did I repay him? By treating him with contempt, by mocking his sacrifice, by humiliating him at his own daughter's wedding. His voice broke again. The man who saved my life had to take out a loan for my wedding, and I thanked him by treating him like a fool. Simon turned back to me, his voice ringing with newfound conviction. But that ends now. He raised his champagne glass, which someone had quietly refilled. Ladies and gentlemen, raise your glasses, not to me, not to my wife. 300 guests lifted their glasses in unison, the crystal glittering like stars. Raise your glasses. To Arthur Cole. Simon's voice was filled with genuine emotion. The man who gave me my life, not once, but twice. Once when he saved me from that fire, and again tonight, when he showed me what true grace is by forgiving a man who didn't deserve it. To Arthur. The cry echoed through the ballroom, followed by thunderous applause as 300 guests rose to their feet. I stood there, overwhelmed, as the same people who had witnessed my humiliation now celebrated my vindication. But the greatest gift was seeing the look on my daughter's face, a look of pure love and pride. Clara made her way to me, tears streaming down her face. "Dad," she whispered, "I'm so sorry. I'm so proud of you. I love you." As I held my daughter surrounded by the celebration my sacrifice had created, I realized that sometimes the most difficult journeys lead to the most beautiful destinations. The final toast of the night was for truth, for justice, and for the quiet power of doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything, and even when it takes 32 years. To be seen, it's always worth the wait.